BookTube family, we are back with yet another video where I'll be covering my top 10 reads of the year. But before we jump into that, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell notification. That way you're notified when I post a new video. Now, we are coming into the close of the year. We're officially in November. So I felt like now was the perfect time to narrow down my top 10 reads of the year. This was a very difficult task, but I was able somehow to narrow down my top 10 reads. So let's dive right in. At number 10, I have Before I Let Go by Miss Kennedy Ryan. This is the first book in the Skyland trilogy, and I just adore this series so much. It may be a shock that I have a romance on my top 10, but sometimes it's good to spice things up a little bit. And I did that with Miss Kennedy Ryan. I gave this book a shot, being very uneducated in the romance genre, and boy, did I love this. In this series, we're following our two main characters, Yasmin and Josiah, and they are a divorced couple who own a restaurant together and have children together. So they have to work with each other from the business side of things as well as the co-parenting side of things. And what I love so much about this book in particular is how it deals with real life traumas and situations and scenarios that this couple are going through throughout the duration of the time that they're divorced, and so on and so forth. So Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan is a must read, especially for my fellows out there who want to dip their toes into the romance genre. I would highly recommend Before I Let Go, book one in the Skyland trilogy by Miss Kennedy Ryan. You won't be disappointed. At number 9, I have Twice by Mitch Albom, and this was just simply fantastic. This is the third Mitch Albom novel I've read, and the other two were just spectacular in their own ways as well. The other two being Tuesdays with Morrie and The Five People You Meet in Heaven. But Twice was exceptional. This story follows a man who has the gift to go back to a pivotal moment in his life and change it for a better outcome. Now, the kicker is he only has one other chance to go back and redeem that situation or scenario, which is a crazy concept to think about. And Mitch Albom is a masterful writer when it comes to bigger rooted questions revolved around his story. In this book in particular, for example, the main character may have said something embarrassing to his middle school crush. In that situation, he can go back in time to fix that situation, sauce it up a little bit. That way, the outcome the second time around will be completely different than the first go around. And it's just so unique, and it's so awesome to see how Mitch Albom is able to craft these deep-rooted questions about life and how we view things and build his story around them. Twice is amazing. It's an awesome palate cleanser. It's very short and sweet. There are a few twists in there as well, which I was pretty thrown off by Mitch Albom. He doesn't really throw twists in there like that, but Twice was just a phenomenal read. I'm at this point now where I believe every Mitch Albom book that I pick up is just going to be absolutely stellar. But if you have not read Twice, I would recommend this one tenfold. At number 8, I have Ring Shout by P. DeJelly Clark, and boy, did this book slap. This book kind of had a resurgence when the movie Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler, came out, because it just has so many similarities. But in this novella, we're following a band of friends slash hunters, and what they're hunting is absolutely crazy. They are taking down demons disguised as Ku Klux Klan members, and they are feeding off of racism and hate. This is an action-packed monster horror history, just mosh pit, and I love this novella so much. Peter Jelly Clark is such a brilliant author, and I had the privilege in interviewing him on Instagram, and he gave a lot of insight as to how he built the story, all the research that went into it, and just all the perspectives that he had to gather to construct this awesome novella. But Ring Shout, yeah, this is definitely one of them ones. Assassins Anonymous by Rob Hart comes in hot at number 7. This was such a fun read, and in this story we're following our main character, who is a professional hitman, and he gives up the life of being a hitman. He's just done with unaliving people for money, and then he joins an AA group full of other professional hitmen and women who are just simply just done with the life. Until something big happens, there are people out looking for our main character, and he has to go on this mission to figure out what's going on while not unaliving people. So it's very funny because he comes up with all these creative ways to take people out. And how I like to describe this book is, think of John Wick just gives it up and goes to an AA meeting, and then an AA group, and then people start hunting him down, where he has to be John Wick, but he can't pew pew everybody. This was a very unique story, very heartfelt. There is a lot of emotions that are tied into the story as well that drives our main character into the reason as to why he does not want to be a professional hitman, and it really hits home. But this is an awesome first book to a trilogy. Book 2, The Medusa Protocol, is also awesome, and Rob Hart actually just just announced the third installment to this series. So this one was a fun one. If you're looking for a quick, exciting, exhilarating read that will just have you turning the pages nonstop, I couldn't recommend Assassins Anonymous more. This one was awesome. At number 6, I have SlewFoot by Brom, which I read back in October, and honestly, I don't think I could have chosen a more perfect book to read in the month of October, but this book takes place in about 1666 colonial New England, where we follow our main character, Abatha, who is a widow who's accused of witchcraft. Now, back in this time, I kind of felt like everything a woman thought, said, or did was considered witchcraft. In this sense, that's exactly what it was. But Abatha, she starts to develop this relationship with an ancient forest magic, a demon known as SlewFoot. When things start getting crazier and crazier, she gets pushed to her absolute limits with the Puritan people, and then from there, she really shows them what's up. But Brom, I didn't realize Brom had it like that. I didn't know about Brom until I read this novel. But now I know who this guy is. I'm planning on reading, Lost Gods very, very soon, as well as Krampus. But SlewFoot, my goodness, it's not too late to read this. This is still a perfect fall/winter read. But SlewFoot by Brom, incredible. Kicking off my top 5 with Look Closer by David Ellis. Now, I go crazy for a mind-bendy, trippy thriller, and Look Closer delivered. In this book, we're following multiple POVs, but for the sake of this, our two main characters, Simon and Vicky, who are they're just the picture perfect married suburban couple. Everything just looks picturesque from the outside until a woman from Simon's past ends up unalived. From there, things just get wild. I'm talking about page turning. Whatever you think you may know is the complete opposite of what is facts in the story. Just all of my guesses and assumptions were completely and utterly wrong until about the last 4 or 5 chapters, where you're just like, what in the world? I did not see that coming at all. That I still think about this book. And when a thriller can linger on my mind for a very long period of time, that's how you know it's one of those ones. So Look Closer by David Ellis. Yeah, if it hasn't been added to your TBR already, go ahead and add that. At number 4, I have the Wayward Pines trilogy by Blake Crouch. Now, Blake Crouch is a masterful writer. He writes dystopian sci-fi thrillers, and they are just phenomenal. I'm talking Dark Matter, Recursion, Upgrade, the Wayward Pines trilogy. They're just all just so crazy good. But in this book in particular, we're following our main character in Ethan Burke, who is a Secret Service agent, and he's sent on this mission to this isolated community called Wayward Pines, where 2 other Secret Service agents went missing. So he has to investigate and see what the heck happened, until when he gets to Wayward Pines, things just go downhill from there. That's all I'll say about this trilogy, because I don't want to give too much away. I want you guys to be all just crazed and in a daze, just like how I was when I read the series. But Blake Crouch does not miss with any of his books. I'm talking about Recursion, Dark Matter, for instance. They're just all incredible stories. But the Wayward Pines trilogy, my goodness. Yeah, I love this series so much. Cracking in at my top three, I have The Woman by Kristen Hanna. Now, I'm not the biggest historical fiction reader. I am more so of a sci-fi fantasy kind of guy. But when it comes to historical fiction and Kristen Hanna, I'm going to read the book 9 times out of 10. And this book in particular almost made me shed some thug tears. In this story, we're following our main character, Frankie, who volunteers as a combat nurse in the Vietnam War. So she is seeing and doing things that our conscious minds could not even comprehend. And the crazy thing about the story is that all of the trials and tribulations and roadblocks you would think would be going on in Vietnam, they really started taking off and getting worse for her when she got back to the States, which I'm more than certain is a lot of veteran female nurses' stories when they came back from Vietnam back into the States. But this was a 5-star read for me, landslide, no brainer, and one that I actually may reread next year because it's just so incredible and just so well done. If you have not read any books by Kristen Hanna, I couldn't recommend The Woman enough, as well as The Nightingale, which is another historical fiction novel. But this definitely cracks into my top 3. Such a beautiful story. At number 2, I've got King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. S.A. Cosby is one of my favorite crime thriller authors of all time in regards to Razorblade Tears, Blacktop Wasteland, All the Sinners Bleed, My Darkest Prayer, King of Ashes. They're all certified bangers. In this book in particular, we're following our main character, Roman, who is a successful young African-American man who was called back home because his father was involved in a bad accident where he gets together with his 2 siblings and he starts to find out that this accident isn't really what it seems and that it solely revolves around his little brother who got involved into a lot of things that he probably shouldn't have gotten involved in. This book was just absolute chaos, but the good type of chaos. But any S.A. Cosby book that you read is going to be absolutely amazing. I would definitely give this one a shot, and you may fall into that S.A. Cosby avalanche effect where you just read and binge read all of his other stories. But King of Ashes, number 2, certified banger, add it to your list. Let me know what you think about it. This was awesome. And at number 1, I have The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, the Lord of Grimdark Fantasy. This book was awesome. This is my first Joe Abercrombie novel that I've ever read. I've been wanting to read the First Law trilogy for so long. It's been on my shelf for almost over a year and a half, and I wanted to give The Devils a chance before I jumped into the First Law, and boy, were my socks knocked off. This book was just everything and some. But in the story, we're following multiple main characters who are all mercenaries. They all have their own special gifts and unique talents, and they all have to come together to escort this princess to her rightful throne. This book is full of banter, full of comedy. It's a found family. There's a lot of action, gore, emotion, and everything that I was looking to find in a grimdark fantasy was in The Devils. I like to compare this to The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but rated R. Joe Abercrombie killed this book, and what made it even sweeter is I thought this was going to be a standalone, but it's actually going to be a trilogy as well. So I cannot wait to be reunited with these characters that I fell in love with. But The Devils was just awesome, and I implore you guys to check this out if you're fantasy readers, because this one was great. And there you have it, BookTube fam, my top 10 reads of the year so far. Let me know in the comments what some of your top reads of the year were so I can check them out. And as always, happy reading.